Hey everybody, and I hope you're having a wonderful Wednesday. I'm Renita Young, and welcome to Your Money Story, where we expose you to different personal finance influencers and talk about things like budgeting, saving, paying off debt, and expose you to different ways of doing that. And so today we are talking about how to budget to beat inflation. It's no secret that we've been seeing the cost of goods and services go up. Right now, if you go in your local grocery store, you might see the cost of eggs go up. You might have seen milk go up a few cents, or even your gas. Now, while those are also tied to commodity prices, we also see a cost of living increase every single year. And so today I want to welcome Holly Trantham, who's from the Financial Diet. She's going to tell us a few ways how to budget to beat inflation. So hang on for a moment. Let me grab Holly.
Hi, Renita. How's it going?
Holly, I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing very good. I'm here in the TFD office, which is, really nice to be able to come in sometimes. So it's also nice
Okay.
to be on this side of the camera. I'm usually in your spot.
Well, I'm so glad you could join me. And did I pronounce your last name correctly, Holly Trantham?
Yes.
Yes, nailed it. I thought so. Well, listen, Holly, we start out with your personal money story. And so while you are in New York City right now, you didn't grow up in New York, but you grew up with a concept of money. And so
Mhm.
what was your relationship with money like growing up?
Yeah, I didn't. I grew up in a pretty, standard middle class to upper middle class household in suburban Atlanta. My parents always imposed upon us the importance of investing and stuff early. So even though when I was first starting out of college, I didn't have a 401k or anything like that because that wasn't what my job didn't offer it. But I started doing pretty early in a different retirement account in a Roth IRA. Changed that up over the years. But I know always knew from the beginning that that was really important. But I didn't have a very strong grasp on how to keep your spending in check.
Okay.
I'm a spender. My mom's a spender. I come from a family of like very generous people who really, if my parents had a really strict budget growing up, I wasn't aware of it, and I never really had a total real grasp of that. So I did get myself into some credit card debt in my early 20s and had to, figure out how to pay that off and stuff. But it was all a learning experience. Could have been much worse.
It could
You
have
know,
been. It could have been much worse for both of us, probably.
yeah.
And so then, was that credit card bill the pivot point for you that made you go, all right, I got to get this under control?
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, it wasn't anything super out of the ordinary. It wasn't anything super high, but it was like probably like $5,000 I owed at one point, and I was researching how to get this under control because I was like, I know how much money I have coming in every month. I don't know how I don't know how this keeps happening. I feel like I'm not spending. I'm not going on vacations. I'm not spending a wild amount every month. But so I researched and I found out what a balance transfer credit card was. I, took some, I applied for one because I happened to have a good credit score because my parents also had told me to get a credit card as soon as I got into college. So
Mm-hmm.
I started having a credit history really early. So I had that education at home. So that was really good because I was able to get a 0% interest balance transfer card, which is where you have, you have a lump sum of debt that you can transfer for a one-time fee. And then you
Mm-hmm.
have 6 to 15, 18 months, whatever the card's terms are, to pay it off without any interest. So that's how I did that. And I
Mm-hmm.
got myself on a really strict plan, got it all paid off. And since then, I have a very much healthy relationship with my spending. And also had to, do the whole assess my spending every month. Let's see how I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually spending on takeout and steamless in New York City. So
Right. And that's actually part of the rules, you say, not rules, but the suggestions you give of how people can budget to beat inflation. Let's start at the top, though. The biggest expense anyone will likely have is housing. So how can people budget to beat inflation in their housing situation?
yeah, so this definitely depends on whether you're a renter or a homeowner. I myself, I live in New York City. I'm a renter, probably will be for a really long time. And obviously, if you're a renter, you don't have as much control over what you're paying for your housing costs every month because, of course, for the time that you have your lease, you have your set rent payment, but then it could go up at the end of your lease. So in New York City, we have this thing called rent stabilization, where it is determined every year the amount that rent stabilized apartments, determined by the city, the amount that landlords are allowed to raise that rent. So currently, I think for October 2021 to September 2022, it's like 0% for the first 6 months, but they're allowed to raise your rent. And that's for leases starting in those dates, but they're allowed to raise your rent 1.5% for a 1-year lease for the second 6 months. And then for 2-year lease, it's 2.5% for the entire term of the lease. So that's based on what you're paying from your previous lease. So if you wanted to renew, that's the percentage it would be. If you're not in a rent stabilized apartment or rent control, but that's like a unicorn. If you're not in a rent stabilized apartment, there may not be as much of a cap on what they can increase your rent. So it depends on, the zoning and everything, but you might find yourself saddled with a several $100 rent increase from year to year. So that is a huge difference, because even if it's $200 a month, that's $1,200 in a year that you're going to be extra on rent. So just trying to if you can, being in a rent stabilized apartment or whatever the equivalent is in your area, if you're not in New York City, definitely something that's helpful for homeowners. Obviously you have, you just have your mortgage account, mortgage amount that you're paying every month. But if you are in, say, an adjustable rate mortgage, you might want to try to refinance to be in a fixed rate mortgage, because that means the interest you're paying every month is going to be the same and it's not going to change. So you can have that really reliable major part of your budget for years to come, and it won't change.
One of the things that you can count on will be the same exact way. Okay.
Exactly.
And so the second thing, obviously, huge part of budgeting to beat inflation, your salary, your income. And so tell us some of the things that someone who has a regular salaried job would consider that would be different from a freelancer or a business owner.
Yeah, a lot of jobs will offer cost of living increases. So I'm actually not sure if there's any. I was researching this and to look this up, because I know of, anecdotally, so many people get cost of living raises each year, but I don't think it's actually regulated, at least not on a federal level. So you definitely need to advocate for yourself too, even if you might, maybe you deserve more than this, but you should at least be getting that 2 to 3% cost of living increase every year. So definitely in your yearly review, bring that up. You deserve to negotiate it. And that goes for hourly too. You can also negotiate your income if you're an hourly worker. It's not just for salary workers.
Gotcha. And so if you are a freelancer or a business owner, you said something specific to consider. I don't know how people feel about this, but go right ahead.
Raise your rates. I've worked with several contractors over the years who are like, by the way, it's the end of the year, so next year my rate will be going up XYZ amount, usually like 2 to 3%. You should be doing that every year. If the cost of everything we are buying is going to keep going up every year. You deserve to be able to keep being able to afford those things. So if you are in control of how much you're charging, it's very standard to raise your rates a few percentage every year. And that's, it doesn't even feel like that much at the time, but it will make a big difference over time. So just reach out to your contacts and say, by the way, this is going up, $10 for the flat rate that we have for this project I work on. To me, it's always worth it to just pay the little bit extra than have to go find a new contractor to work to work with.
And that makes sense, because people will pay for good work, and people will pay more value for what they need from you, to avoid the need to go try out somebody who may or may not work out for them. So good to note that. And then we're almost wrapping up here. Regularly assessing your living costs. There's this thing called lifestyle inflation that a lot of us get if we get a raise. So walk us through briefly how you suggest people regularly assess their living costs.
Yeah, so lifestyle inflation, really briefly, is just, it means your spending is increasing with your income. So you're spending more as you earn more without saving more. So you want to be sure, as you are earning more, you want to be able to increase your savings, not just your spending. Obviously, we all have the conveniences and stuff we want to pay for and stuff that's worth it. But at the end of the day, you should be regularly combing through your statements to see if there's things like subscriptions you're paying for that you don't use. Are there other ways that your overall costs over the years are way higher than they need to be? For instance, maybe you're used to buying a brand new phone every few years, or even every several years getting a new car. Maybe you're buying those things before you actually need to replace the old ones. And that can be a huge cost. There's also, the little costs too, like how much are you spending too much on happy hours? Are you over on your grocery delivery or whatever? You have to decide, any of those things are fine to spend money on. It's just deciding what's actually worth it to you and what is making the biggest difference in your life and is worth the money to sacrifice what you could have saved instead.
Very important to know. And I want to add a pin there, folks. Holly's not saying that none of these costs are worth it. Some of them are worth it, right?
Yeah.
It's just that if you have an opportunity to get a new car, just decide if you want to ride the old one until the wheels fall off or not. And then also you said, and we can wrap up after this with the last point, but you also said just figure out where to do the trade-off. So if I do upgrade a car or upgrade maybe even the type of gas I put in my car, right? Because it's an older vehicle, then maybe cutting down on the type of grocery delivery I have, or even the happy hours may be a way to make an equal exchange with that output of money. And so lastly, you said invest. That's another good way to budget to beat inflation. I'm thinking that you're talking about longer term investing, yes?
Yes. So specifically thinking of like retirement investing, because, the rate of inflation changes from year to year, but it's typically over, I think for 2020, it was 1.23%. And it's often higher than that. I think it was lower last year than it usually is. And you want to make sure over time, your money is worth more it's worth as much, practically to you as it is today. So that means a dollar today in a year from now is going to be worth a little bit less. So you want to make sure it's growing faster than the rate of inflation. So if you want to put, say you want to save $500,000 for retirement, if you have it in an investment account that's earning 7% a year or something like that, you can, in 30 years, you can bet that that's going to be worth $500,000. But if you want to be, and this is just like rough numbers, definitely use a retirement calculator. I like the investor one. I think it's really easy to use. But if you're just saving, you'd have to save more than double that every month in a regular 1% interest high yield savings account. You'd have to save over $1,300 a month for 30 years in order to reach that same amount just by saving. So definitely make your money work for you. Put it into an investment account. Make sure once it's in the account, it's being invested, and definitely go from there.
All right, Holly, I think that's a great place to leave it. Folks, we have been talking about budgeting to beat inflation. And if you want to learn more about Holly or the financial diet, go on ahead and click on over to the financial diet, which also has other resources, as well as career prep, tips on negotiating salary, and lifestyle creep. So folks, thank you so much for joining. And thank you, Holly. I hope you have a lovely day, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.